Ruben Amorim may be gone, but it seems that he fought with almost everyone at Manchester United, including Wilcox, Vival, completely disregarded Ratcliffe. When he was asked to change, he said, I want outs. Ruben Amorim engineered his exit. Ruben Amorim rang up his agent before the Leeds game and said he wanted out. And to be honest, he's the real winner because he got a 10 million compensation fee. You know? It's all being revealed. What went down with Ruben Amorim and Jason Wilcox in that meeting? It's all being revealed. In their face-to-face meeting at Carrington, Wilcox suggested to Amorim that the players were struggling to gain trust with his 3-4-2-1 system and had become confused over his vision. Amorim would train the team in a back four only for a back three to be selected in games. Why train in the back four if you're selecting a back three? They also sensed he lacked faith in them due to his selections and public statements. I mean, the public statements about certain players were a disgrace. Amorim responded that the players need to be changed. Wilcox said he wanted to work through the issues evolving the squad over time, but sticking with Amorim, and reacted by saying, I wish to leave the club, and would be calling his agent. Even though Wilcox said, we just want to change, we just want to adapt, we want to work with you to solve the issues, Amorim said, I'm not changing, I'm not adapting, called his agent, and I want to leave the club. So Ruben Amorim asked to leave. Ruben Amorim reportedly asked to leave, called up his agent because when Wilcox asked him to change, he lost his head. I mean, Wilcox did appoint him knowing he plays a back three, and asking him to play a back four after appointed back three manager is pretty mad. But we all know, we saw 2 games that we were in a back four and we looked better for it. Was Wilcox wrong to ask Ruben Amorim to adapt? It's not his job, it's not his responsibility. But I think if Ruben Amorim was going to make it work at Manchester United, he needed to adapt. And the minute someone suggested to him that he should adapt, he called up his agent and said, I want out of here. That's mad. It's all going down. The fights, the arguments, the big argument with Lisandro Martinez, Jim Ratcliffe getting involved. I'm going to say one thing. I'm going to get into all the reports. There's so much that's come out, guys. I'm going to get into all the reports, but I do not like how involved Jim Ratcliffe is. I do not like how involved Jim Ratcliffe is in these decisions. He needs to take a step back. I think that Ruben Amorim should have been sacked for his performances months ago. And I think it's nuts that he's only gone because he's called out the board and fallen out of Ineos. Not because of his performances. If this didn't, Ruben Amorim would still be here if he didn't basically have a big fallout with Jason Wilcox. Ruben Amorim would still be here if he didn't have a big fallout with Jason Wilcox, which is mad because Ruben Amorim should have been sacked months ago. But at the end of the day, the board's the biggest issue. They appointed Amorim knowing that he's very stubborn, he likes to play this way. They didn't bring him in the wing-backs or midfielders to play the way he wants, so asked him to change. Amorim should have changed, Amorim should have adapted, and Amorim's stubbornness is why he didn't make it work at Man United. But the board didn't give him this, asked him to change, it blew up. Amorim wanted more power than they were willing to give him. They should have backed him in January, they should have brought in a midfielder, they should have brought in wing-backs. The biggest disgrace is Ineos bringing Amorim in the first place. Amorim was a failure. Amorim's probably the worst manager we've had in my lifetime. Amorim was a failure. He was awful. But when you're hearing stuff like Jason Wilcox raise concerns about bringing Amorim in, Dan Ashworth got sacked because he didn't agree to bring Ruben Amorim in. Yet they ignored the footballing experts because Jim Ratcliffe wanted Amorim and Barada wanted Amorim. But then didn't get Amorim what he needed to play a system and told him to adapt. Amorim should have adapted. I know that. You know that. We all know we're better in back four. We all know he should have adapted. But if you bring in a back three manager and you start asking him to play a back four and you start saying you're the head coach, you've got to play this way, and you start telling him what to do, he isn't going to like that. Did Amorim act like a child if he's walked out? Probably yes. Amorim threatened to quit many times. Did Amorim give an F about the club? No. I told you this now. When Ollie left, he was in tears. Amorim called up his agent and threatened to walk so many times, but waited till Man United sacked him, so he got his big 10 million payout, and him and his staff are having a party. Do you see Amorim and his staff? Amorim and his staff are the happiest I've ever seen them. They're all dancing and laughing. You know what? Inside leaks have come out. I spoke to somebody that they have been so happy. And to be fair, don't blame them. They've got a big payout. But Amorim knew on Friday he was going to be gone by Monday, Tuesday. He's just been waiting for it. He's having the best time of his life. He orchestrated his exit, Ruben Amorim. I thought Ineos were getting rid of him because he called Ineos out. But Ruben Amorim orchestrated his own exit, which I think is actually nuts. I think he's actually nuts. Wilcox is relaying what the fans want. Adapt. Agree. Wilcox is saying to Amorim what I'd say to Amorim, what you guys would say to Amorim, because we were better in a back four. We did need to adapt. Wilcox had a meeting with the players. The meeting with the players told Wilcox how they felt. Wilcox told Amorim that. Amorim lost his mind and threatened to quit. Amorim said, I'm going to walk because you told me to adapt. Wilcox, you shouldn't have brought Amorim in the first place. You shouldn't bring in a manager in that's so obsessed with his formation, his 3-4-3, and so unwilling to adapt in the first place. Was Wilcox wrong for telling Amorim to adapt? I don't know. Because I would have. But they appointed Amorim. They appointed him knowing he plays a 3-4-3. The problem was he played a 4 at the back twice and we looked so much better for it. He then went to a 5 at the back versus Wolves. Amorim did it to himself. If Amorim never went to a 4 at the back, we wouldn't have seen that we're better in a 4 at the back. And he wouldn't have been called out for going to a 5 at the back versus Wolves. Bournemouth better in a 4. Newcastle better in a 4. Villa better in a 4. We go to a back 5 versus Wolves. We can't beat them. Jason Wilcox goes to Amorim. Go back to that back 4. Go and adapt. We need to make it work. You're not getting the best out of the players. Ruben Amorim's fuming. Because he's been told he's not getting the best out of the players. But Jason Wilcox said to Ruben Amorim, we want to make it work with you. But to make it work with you, you need to adapt. And Amorim said, I ain't adapting. I ain't changing. You ain't telling me what to do. And he called his agent up. And look, if we told Amorim that he was going to be manager, we told Amorim we were going to give him everything he wanted to do his 3-4-3 and we were going to back him. And then we've gone around and said to Amorim, we're not bringing you in a wing back. We're not bringing you in the striker you want in Watkins. We're not bringing you in the midfielder you want in Carlos Baleba. And you need to change formation. That is a disgrace from Ineos because they've lied to Amorim. But if they appointed Amorim and told him he was going to be a head coach and told him they were going to buy him players to play this way, then that's Amorim for not adapting. Do you know what I mean? It's what was Amorim told? Amorim must have been told he was going to be manager. Amorim must have been told they were going to get him this, and this, and back him to play his way. I think Amorim's been lied to, and that's why Amorim's reacted the way he did. But yeah, Amorim should have adapted. Everyone but Amorim could see he needed to adapt. And Amorim was too stubborn to adapt. And Amorim's stubbornness and ego cost him his job. But those above Amorim, if you told him that you were going to back him to play this way, and you didn't back him to play that way, so then because you didn't bring in the players he wants to play that way, you're now telling him to play another way, you can see why Amorim's mad. Dorgu played a left back in a back 4, though. Do you know what I mean? Well, he was never an out-and-out wing back. Amorim looked happier getting sacked than he ever did at Sporting. To be fair, if I got 10 million for getting sacked, give me that money. Amorim looked the happiest I've ever seen him yesterday. He is a coward. Amorim is a coward. Amorim has an ego issue. But he should have been... Do you know what annoys me? Is Amorim should have been sacked after Grimsby. He should have been sacked after Grimsby. If he wasn't sacked after Grimsby, he should have been sacked after Everton or Brentford, and he wasn't. Amorim would still win a job if he got on with Wilcox. It's like the people running this club would have kept this man in a job. A man that came, 15th? They would have kept him in a job if he was a yes man. Doesn't matter how bad he is. If he was a yes man, they would have kept him in a job. He finished 15th, our lowest ever finish. He lost the Europa League final with Spurs. He lost to Grimsby. He disrespected the academy players. He only ever won back-to-back games once in a year and in 14 months at United. The performances on the pitch have barely improved in 14 months. Yes, we've gone up the league table, but the performances on the pitch have not got much better. With a 15% clean sheet ratio under Ruben Amorim, he won 32% of his league games. Only Ange lost more games than him in the league since he got hired. He refused to switch to a back 4 and bring on an extra attacker when we lost to a 10-man Everton. He played a back 5 and dropped points against West Ham, Wolves and Bournemouth. He dropped points at home to the worst Premier League side in history. He switched back-to-back 5 against Wolves after beating Newcastle with a back 4 the previous game when we couldn't beat the worst Wolves side in history. Players are playing out of position and don't fit the system. The system leaves the midfield open every game. The club invested 200 million in attack and he's struggling to get players in form, and Maino's development stagnated. The reasons for keeping Amorim in is we can't sack another manager. The people above the manager are the problem. The cycle continues. But I saw this tweet from Staffy TV and he listed out a million reasons why Amorim should have been sacked, and he's right. He's absolutely right. He should have gone ages ago. I can't believe they didn't sack him ages ago. It is nuts. But I want to get into the reports of what's gone on, what's gone down. Because a meeting has been called, and it is, I'm 9 minutes in. I could just rant all I want, but let's get to the point. Barada and Wilcox, after sacking Ruben Amorim, called a meeting with the players Monday morning. Wilcox told those listening that in the last two days has really shocked him. He insisted the club had given Amorim what he wanted. I think that's a bit of a lie, but we continue. But he had made his feelings clear on an exit. We don't understand where the last 48 hours have come from, he told the squad. Wilcox said that Amorim had changed and United had to act. What is now coming out is that Ruben Amorim orchestrated his exit. Ruben Amorim fell out with the players. Ruben Amorim fell out with Vivel, Wilcox, Ratcliffe, called up his agent and orchestrated his own Manchester United exit. Alice, you getting paid by Ineos, or do you believe everything you're told? This is The Athletic. This is Laurie Whitwell. I believe Laurie Whitwell. I believe David Ornstein. I believe Fabrizio Romano. If it was Graham Bailey, I wouldn't believe it. And also, why would I be getting paid by Ineos if I've spent the last week slandering Ineos? I've spent the last week slandering Ineos, so yeah. I've spent the last week slandering Ineos, so I don't know why someone's saying I've been paid by Ineos. It was then said that Wilcox informed the players that Fletcher would be in charge for the next 2 games, taking in Wednesday's trip to Burnley and Sunday's FA Cup tie to Brighton, Hove Albion. Fletcher then took a session alongside Travis Binnon, the under-21s league coach, and the mood was said to be excellent. So apparently the mood is really good now Amorim's left. I mean, Amorim and his coaches were jumping for joy when they were told they were sacked, which, look, it's a bad look that Amorim orchestrated his exit and was jumping for joy with his coaches when he was sacked and he gets 10 million quid. But it's an even worse look on Ineos for bringing in a guy, telling him you were going to do this, this and that, not doing this, this and that. Amorim being the worst manager in our history, not sacking him because he's the worst manager of history and actually sacking him because he's fallen out with you because he's called you out for not doing this, this and that. It's nuts. But the interesting thing that keeps being said here, and this is by Laurie Whitwell, is that Ruben Amorim basically asked to go. Ruben Amorim had a big bust up with Jason Wilcox on the Thursday or Friday, called his agent, asked to go. Ruben Amorim asked to go. They said that everything was going well. They were willing to back him. They were willing to give him time. They had a big bust up because Jason Wilcox suggested he goes to a back 4 and adapts. And Ruben Amorim said, absolutely not. Don't tell me what to do. I want to leave. I mean, that is what's being said on what went down. I want to break down a bit of what was said in the Athletic article because so much came out. It was nuts. How am I an Ineos sympathiser? Have you not seen my 10-minute rant yesterday on Ineos? I'd recommend watching it. I've done a big video on why Ineos are disgrace and should leave. So I don't know who you're talking to. But yeah, let's get into this story. This is from Laurie Whitwell. In a face-to-face meeting, Wilcox told Amorim players were struggling to trust and understand the 3-4-2-1 system. I mean, Wilcox is speaking facts. Should Wilcox be telling Amorim what to do? We can talk about that another day. But Wilcox is speaking facts. The players were struggling in the 3-4-2-1 system, and they had been for 14 months, and Amorim refused to change it despite the fact it clearly wasn't working. The squad felt confused by mixed messages, training with a back 4 and playing a back 3. If you were going to play a back 3, why are you training in a back 4? So fair enough. What are you doing? There is the report, there's also a leak coming out, and I've not put it in today's video, but there is also a leak that came out today that apparently Ruben Amorim's training sessions were average, that it was like a child was taking the training sessions, la la la. But every time we sack a manager, a report comes out the next day that the players think their training session was average, or the players felt that their training was bad. Every manager, the players think their training is bad when they get sacked. So I'm not interested in going into that. But it was said the players also sensed a lack of faith from Amorim based on selection and public comments. He did start to throw players under the bus the last few weeks. Amorim started to change these last few weeks, you could tell. Amorim pushed back saying the players needed to be changed, not the system. The system needed to be changed, but so did the players. You know, the problem with Amorim was his stubbornness. You know, Jason Wilcox is thinking, we've got some good players here, the system needs to change. Amorim is thinking, the system is perfect, the system is amazing, the players need to change. But actually, Amorim's system was shite. Amorim needed to change the system, and Amorim was too egotistical and stubborn to change his own system. But the players are also a problem. The players and the system was a problem. But Amorim thought that the players were the problem and the system was perfect. And Wilcox must have thought that the system was a problem and the players... I don't think he thought the players were perfect. I don't think anyone does. But it's like, yes, the players were a problem, but Ruben Amorim failed to acknowledge that while the players were a problem, he was an even bigger problem. Because his system... maybe got the best out. Tell me one player Ruben Amorim got the best out of. Aiden Heaven. Tell Aiden Heaven and maybe Mason Mount. He improved Luke Shaw and Mason Mount's injuries, but we've seen Luke Shaw better under Ollie. Aiden Heaven's the only player that and Mason Mount, the only players I feel that got better under Ruben Amorim. The only two. Wilcox responded that that the club want to evolve the squad over time while sticking with Amorim. So Wilcox said to Amorim, we want to stick with you, but we want to evolve the squad, we want to adapt, we want to change the approach. And Amorim acted strongly, saying he wanted to leave the club. Basically, Jason Wilcox went to Amorim. You played a back four a couple of games. It was looking quite good. You've gone to a back five versus Wolves. You can't beat Wolves. The players, I spoke to the players. They're not understanding your system. We think you should change your system. Blah, 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 blah. We think you should evolve the squad over time, and we will back you to do that. Ruben Amorim thought, absolutely not. The players are the issue. F off. I'm leaving. Calls up his agent. I want out of here. He's told me to adapt. Ruben Amorim's fuming because when he got the Man United job, he was promised that they were going to back him to play this 3-4-3. And then 14 months later, they tell him to change to a 4 at the back, which looks bad on Ineos. But Ruben Amorim's 4-3-3 was crap. Ruben Amorim should have been a good enough manager himself to know he should have changed and adapted his formation. I get why Ruben Amorim's fuming that, Wilcox has said that to him. How dare you? I'm the manager. But Ruben Amorim was such a bad manager that he couldn't see what everybody could see, that we are better in the back four. He couldn't see that we do need to adapt. Yes, the players were an issue, but he could not see that his tactics were flawed. And that is really concerning when a manager cannot see that he's also an issue. The players are an issue, but you're also an issue. He's so stubborn. Apparently, there had been deep doubts at Manchester United before Amorim's exit, and Amorim had talked about quitting as early as January, and later confessed he feared the club was broken. The one thing about Amorim, okay, yeah, he improved Ahmad as well, because he actually played Ahmad. The one thing about Amorim, is he threatened to quit so many times. He smashed TVs, he threatened to quit so many times. He kept threatening to quit. Do you think when he called up his agent and told Wilcox he wants to go, do you think that was him threatening to quit for the 5th time, acting out like a child? Or do you think he actually was orchestrated his exit? I'm always interested. You can't argue the club is broken, yeah. They should have listened to Ashworth. You can't argue the club is broken. The club is full of egotistical people that think they know best. Jim Ratcliffe has an ego. Ruben Amorim has an ego. Omar Barada has an ego. Yeah? All they had to do was listen to the most experienced man when it comes to the footballing side of things, Dan Ashworth. But they didn't like what he had to say. They thought they knew better and they got rid of him after spending all that money to bring him in. You brought Dan Ashworth in for a reason. You spent that money to bring Dan Ashworth in for a reason. You waited all that time to bring in Dan Ashworth for a reason. The first big thing Dan Ashworth has to do is help you choose a new manager. He says no to Ruben Amorim, who has been the worst manager in our history, and he got sacked for that. Dan Ashworth is sitting there thinking, you twats, you egotistical twats, had you listened to me, we would have been in a much better place. And Dan Ashworth's probably sitting there with a smug look on his face like, what a bunch of twats. And you know what? Fair play, Dan Ashworth. Because Dan Ashworth knows more about running a football club than anybody at Ineos, than Jim Ratcliffe. Do you know what the worst part is? We can talk about Ruben Amorim being a big failure. We can talk about Jason Wilcox. We can talk about Omar Brada. But the biggest problem was Jim Ratcliffe's influence. You were controlling too much. I don't like how much Jim Ratcliffe was controlling. I don't like how much of a say Jim Ratcliffe has. And people will say, but he's part owner, he invests the money in. Yes. But the owners shouldn't actually be having that much of a say. The owners should be putting the money in and employing clever people to make the decisions. But the smartest person you employed, you sacked because he had a different idea to you. Jim Ratcliffe thought he knew more than Dan Ashworth. Jim Ratcliffe thought he knew more than Dan Ashworth. Look, we all have opinions, we have strong opinions, we'll back ourselves. But if I was working at a football club with Dan Ashworth, I'd be listening, and I thought we should get this person in, and Dan Ashworth thought we should get that person in, I'd be listening to Dan Ashworth. Because also, you've got to remember, Dan Ashworth said we shouldn't have gone for a guy. Dan Ashworth was the one that raised concerns about the Agati signing. Dan Ashworth raised concerns about the Agati signing. Dan Ashworth raised concerns about bringing Ruben Amorim in. And Ineos didn't like that. Dan Ashworth said that we shouldn't have sold McTominay and brought in a guy. Dan Ashworth was not in favour of that in the summer of 24. And Dan Ashworth got accused of being a Brexit merchant. He loves British players because he didn't want to sell McTominay and bring in a guy. Now, I wanted a DM and I thought that McTominay needed to go to bring in a DM. So I get why Ineos thought, get rid of McTominay, bring in a guy. A guy isn't the DM we should have signed, but we should have brought in a DM. McTominay was an AM. But Dan Ashworth didn't want a guy. Dan Ashworth didn't want Ruben Amorim. Dan Ashworth got sacked for it because Jim Ratcliffe thought he knew better. When you actually deep it, the biggest, we could talk about Ruben Amorim being the biggest failure ever. But Jim Ratcliffe's a twat. Like, he thinks he knows best. It was also claimed that Ruben Amorim was reportedly shocked by the squad's lack of physicality and fragile mentality, even claiming he knew they would lose a particular game just by watching how the players tied their laces in warm-ups, which was an interesting thing that came out. A really interesting thing that came out. People say that Ashworth wanted Southgate, but I will tell you that's not true. I will tell you this now. Basically, you know when there's heat on Ineos, yeah? You know, you spent 5 million to bring Dan Ashworth in. You waited 6 months to bring him in and you sacked him after 5 months. That's not a good look on Ineos. Everyone's going, why has Dan Ashworth been sacked? Rather than putting out, we sacked Dan Ashworth because he didn't agree with us on bringing in Ruben Amorim and he wasn't on the same page as to bring Ruben Amorim in. They then said, oh, we wanted Southgate. Oh, we wanted this. Oh, we wanted that. You know, Dan Ashworth didn't want to bring in a guy. Dan Ashworth didn't want to bring in Ruben Amorim. But what Man United did is they made up this story that he wanted to bring in Southgate. I have a very good source when it comes to Dan Ashworth. I knew, and I have proof and I have receipts of this actually. I have DM receipts of this if you want to see it. I knew Dan Ashworth was going to be sacked before it was announced, before anyone. Because I had a very good, I can show you my receipts. Because I don't get information, by the way. I very, very rarely get exclusive information. I am not a journalist. I'm a YouTuber. I just talk about what other people say. Every now and then I get information, yeah. Every now and then I get information on things that are going on in United. And I wasn't allowed to release this information for obvious reasons. But I had a very good source. The same guy that told me Ashworth was gone hours before Ornstein dropped the news also said Ashworth never wanted Southgate. But Man United told Gary Neville that we wanted Southgate. And Man United told a couple media outlets like Samuel Luckhurst that we wanted Southgate, that Ashworth wanted Southgate. People think Ashworth got sacked because he wanted Southgate, because Man United told Gary Neville that, and Man United told Samuel Luckhurst that. Man United told them that to try and look better about sacking Ashworth. Because if you're Ineos, you know that Man United fans don't want Southgate. So if you spread a fake lie that Ashworth wanted Southgate, you know that the Man United fans are like, fair enough, they sacked Ashworth, he's a clown. Because that's how Man United fans act online. Oh, fair enough, they sacked him, he's a clown. When he's not a clown, he's the smartest guy ever. But at 2:38 a.m., I got this message on December 8th at 2:38 a.m. Big news coming early morning. Ashworth has left. Don't say anything yet or don't tell anyone. Got to keep this hush as it's just gone down. A lot went down. I'll tell you more later. 2:38 a.m. 9 a.m. the next day. Dan Ashworth leaves Man United. 9 a.m. that morning. And that source told me it was nothing to do with Southgate. It was nothing to do with Dan Ashworth wanting Southgate. He didn't suggest Southgate. It was because Dan Ashworth said, you should have sacked Ten Hag in the summer if you were going to bring in a manager 3 months later after spending £200 million. He called out Ineos for not sacking Ten Hag in the summer and spending all that money on Ten Hag just to sack him. He said we shouldn't sack Ten Hag for Amorim when Amorim is a completely different style of manager and we don't have the funds to do a 3-4-3. He raised concerns about the Agate signing and Ineos thought they knew better than him and that's why he was sacked. So the biggest issue, we can talk about Ruben Amorim being the worst manager ever, but the biggest issue is Ineos for hiring Ruben Amorim, for ignoring the man they paid 5 million to bring in. You literally waited like 6-7 months, paid 5 million to bring Dan Ashworth in, and then you were like, we're not going to listen to you because we know better. I'm Jim Ratcliffe. I know better. It's nuts. I very rarely get exclusive information, but I think when it comes to Ashworth, I'm going to trust this guy more than I'm going to trust Samuel Luckhurst. New tweet from Romano. There is some rumours that Ollie's going to come in, but I don't think he will. Is some rumours. Guys, I need to get into so much news. You don't even understand how much news there is to get into. It's absolutely nuts. So I'm going to hurry up and get through the news. And then if I have time, I'll go through the live chats. But let's dive into it. Someone said new tweet from Romano. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer waiting for Man United to decide if he's keen on caretaker job. I don't want Ollie. Romano said Ollie's basically begging for the job. Romano says Ollie's basically desperate for the job. I don't want Ollie. What's that? The reason I don't want Ollie is because it was McKenna that did all the work. I'll say that. Ollie without McKenna, not for me. Anyway, let's continue on. I think that Ruben Amorim should have switched to a back four. I think Ruben Amorim should have adapted and all of that as well. I think all of that. But I don't like how the people that brought Ruben Amorim in, knowing he plays a back three and telling him they were going to back him to play a back three, and now telling him to play a back four. Do you know what I mean? Like, you brought him in, you told him you were going to give him this, this, and this, but you didn't. Do you know what I mean? So they didn't give him what they said they were going to give him. He should have, look, Ruben Amorim should have been clever enough and smart enough as a manager to know that he should go to a back four, or he was so much better in a back four. But I don't like that he was being told to by Jim Ratcliffe, particularly. I get Wilcox. Wilcox never wanted Amorim to begin with. Wilcox had, concerns about Amorim, and Wilcox is actually a coach. But why is Jim Ratcliffe telling Ruben Amorim what to do? Wilcox shouldn't realistically be telling Ruben Amorim what to do, but I get it, he's a coach. But why is Jim Ratcliffe so involved? Why is isn't that not a massive red flag? How involved Jim Ratcliffe is? Like, you don't know, you're not a footballing expert, you're just a clever businessman. You're meant to bring in footballing people to make the decisions. I just feel like it's such a red flag. I feel like it's such a red flag how involved Jim Ratcliffe is. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that's just me that thinks that. I just see a massive red flag. 121 goals a season under Ollie. Well, it wasn't that many, but was it that many? I don't know, actually. I feel like, was it that many? But you got to remember, when Ollie was manager, McKenna and Carrick did all the coaching. So I would bring Ollie in with McKenna and Carrick, but I don't know about Ollie by himself. David Ornstein said some interesting stuff. Okay, I'm going to power through the news, people. I'm going to power through the news. David Ornstein on Amorim and Wilcox relationship ahead of Amorim being sacked. We didn't hear about fundamental breakdowns during much of Amorim's 14 months, but clearly it's more recent times. There has been suggestions of tensions. I don't think it was only about formation. There would have been many factors, vision, perception, on what promises have and haven't been kept. Dan Ashworth is saying it's not just because, not Dan Ashworth, David Ornstein. Getting confused here. David Ornstein's basically saying Ruben Amorim was also fuming because he probably feels he's been lied to. I think Ruben Amorim feels he's been lied to. I think they probably told Ruben Amorim they were going to back him to play 3-4-2-1, and they didn't bring him in wing backs and they didn't bring him in midfielder, and it wasn't working, so they told him to change, and Ruben Amorim feels betrayed. I think it was probably that. David Ornstein also said that United remain in the market for a left winger. We need a left winger. We don't have a single left winger at the club because they got rid of Garnacho, they got rid of Rashford, they got rid of Sanchez, they got rid of Anthony, and I agree they all should have gone. Rashford was the best of those players, but he fell out with the manager and they backed the manager, and that's fair. But United need a left winger because we're going to move to a 4-3-3 and we need a left winger. We don't have a left winger. So United need to do that. People say Cunha can play on the left. Cunha's a central zones player, ball to feet player. Well, surely Evans and Fletcher stay on as assistant coach with Ollie for 6 months. Why can't that work? I mean, it could work. I'm not confident in it. It could work, but I'm not confident in it, if I was going to be completely honest. Do you know what I mean? It could work, but I don't know. I just think when I look at Ollie working, Carrick and McKenna are much more experienced coaches than Fletcher and Evans. And I just think when Ollie working with Carrick and McKenna, I like the idea of, I don't know. I'm just skeptical. Do you know what? The thing is, this is what confuses me. I felt that Ineos lied to Amorim. I think that's clear. Ineos lies. But I also felt that they were willing to go to another level to back Amorim compared to what we've seen in the past. They got rid of Garnacho, they got rid of Rashford, they got rid of all these people for Amorim. They apparently were willing to sell Kobbie Mainoo for 40 million to back Amorim. They were apparently willing to potentially sell a £100 million rated midfielder, one of the best talents Carrington's ever produced, for 40 million. Now, Amorim has gaslighted some of this fan base into thinking Mainoo wasn't going to be that good. For context, we spent 52 million on Fred. We spent 52 million pounds on Fred. We spent 50 million pounds on Agate, but we were willing to sell Mainoo for 40 million to make Amorim happy. I'm worried about the ownership. A manager that finished 15th, you would have sold Kobbie Mainoo for 40 million to please a manager that finished 15th when you spent 50 million on Agate, when this club spent 50 million on Fred, when Conor Gallagher went for 40 million. Kobbie Mainoo Like, what? What? Chelsea are getting 40 million for players that are fucking 10 times worse than Maino. I just couldn't believe that. Because there's a part of me that's like, well, they showed they were willing to go to another level to back Amorim. I mean, this is what confuses me. But you're right here. There's no plan. What is the plan? I'm seriously worried about the future of Manchester United. I wanted Amorim gone. Everyone knows I wanted Amorim gone. Everyone knows I thought Amorim was rubbish. But I'm seriously worried. Because I'm worried for the next manager. I want Ruben Amorim gone, but I don't trust them to bring in the right manager next. I don't trust them to back the manager next. I don't trust that the next manager will succeed. Yes, Amorim should have gone. Yes, Amorim was awful. But I don't trust this ownership to bring in the right players, the right manager, and any of that. You know? Imagine selling Kobbie Mainoo for 40 million when you spent 50 million on a guy. It's mad. Here's an interesting report. Sir Jim Ratcliffe was reportedly warned that hiring Ruben Amorim was a risk. Concerns were raised over the massive cost of reshaping the squad for a 3-4-3 and the impact on the academy and an experienced coaching staff, aka that's what Dan Ashworth got sacked for saying. Dan Ashworth said this to Jim Ratcliffe. Jim Ratcliffe thought, you better than Dan Ashworth. Bye-bye, Dan Ashworth. Twats. Anyway, despite the warnings, Ratcliffe pushed ahead. Amorim was sacked after 14 months with a 31.9% win rate, the lowest of any permanent manager in the post-Sir Alex Ferguson era. There's some people saying that you're toxic if you want Ruben Amorim out. You're not toxic if you want a Ruben Amorim out. He was awful. But if you think sacking Ruben Amorim is going to solve all our problems, then you're deluded. Everyone has a right to want Amorim in, Amorim out, whatever. Everyone has a right to opinion. Some fans think anyone who's Amorim out is toxic and an issue. No, you're not. If you want Amorim out, you have every right to want Ruben Amorim out. He was awful. But if you think that a new manager is going to solve all our problems, you are deluded. Because the bigger problems are those above Amorim, and they are still here. They are still here. We sold wingers and now we need wingers. I mean, like, you sold your wingers, then 3 months later you say to Amorim, can you play a formation with wingers, even though we don't have any wingers other than Ahmad? And then Bumo's technically, I guess, a winger. I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts. Also, to be fair to Amorim, he fell out with Vivel. He fell out with Vivel. Because Vivel got Sesko, he wanted Watkins. Vivel got Lamons, he wanted Martinez. I think Lamons over Martinez is a big tick, but I think Sesko over Watkins is not a big tick. We needed an experienced striker, we knew that. But Ruben Amorim has fallen out with a lot of people. It all went down on Friday. Basically, let's explain the situation. It all went down on Friday. Ruben Amorim fell out with Jason Wilcox, rung up his agent, said he wanted out. Ruben Amorim fell out with Vivel. All over signings, all over lack of backing, all over asking to be changed. Ruben Amorim had a shouting match with Kobbie Mainoo's family. Ruben Amorim fell out with Mainoo. But also, Ruben Amorim fell out with Lisandro Martinez. Laurie Whitwell, oh, that's my alarm to say that I need to get going, so I'm going to have to wrap up the live stream in 2 minutes. But Laurie Whitwell, Adam Crafton said this. Amorim and Lisandro Martinez squared up to each other during training in December. Lisandro Martinez, Captain Lisandro Martinez, squared up to Ruben Amorim during training last week. In the period, well, not last week, a couple of weeks ago, in the period that Man United faced West Ham and Palace, Martinez said he was ready to start and felt that Amorim was overlooking him, made his point in what was described as an intense manner. Now, to be fair, Ruben Amorim, the one big bit of credit I'll give Ruben Amorim is injury load management. You look at Shaw, you look at Mount, Ruben Amorim didn't want to rush back injured players and he dealt with it well. So if Ruben Amorim felt that Lisandro Martinez wasn't ready to start, I back Ruben Amorim on that. And I think Martinez was wrong to square up to Ruben Amorim. Martinez was wrong to square up to Ruben Amorim for not starting him after he'd been out for nearly a year of an ACL. So I actually back Ruben Amorim on that. But he's fallen out with Mainoo, he's fallen out with Martinez, he's fallen out with Vivel. There's just fallouts, arguments, bust-ups. It's all gone down. It's all gone down, to be honest. But madness. Who said Le Mans is mid? I've been really impressed with Le Mans. I think with Le Mans, you can see there's been a few moments where maybe his lack of experience showed. But I think with Le Mans in general, I've been pretty impressed. I don't know about you guys. I thought he saved us the last 2 games. I know we will never have a clear out. We need to bring in a lot of new players so the manager can choose to play new players and it's not stuck with old players who've seen more sackings than trophies. We need We need a few signings. We need 2 top midfielders and we need a left winger. We need a left winger and 2 top midfielders. We probably need a long-term left back. We'll see how Dorgu does in the back four. We need a lot of players. Alice, don't be naive. Would you want anyone to tell you how to run your channel? How to speak on your channel? The time you should broadcast? Yeah, I agree. The topic you should discuss. So why call him a coward? You make a point. But Ruben Amorim, like for me, this is the difference. If my channel was not working, if I was getting no views, my channel was failing, everyone was unsubscribing, and someone came to me and told me I should do this, 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 and this to my channel, then I would listen to that person. If Ruben Amorim was winning every game, winning trophies, and Jason Wilcox is telling him to change, then that is a disgrace. And I don't think that Jason Wilcox should have told Amorim to change. But Amorim was failing. Amorim was finishing 15th. Amorim was playing awful football. Amorim was not doing a good job at Man United. We were sick because everyone around us is crap. Yeah? So Ruben Amorim is being asked to do this, this, and this, which he doesn't like. But Ruben Amorim wasn't doing a very good job. If my channel was failing and someone told me I should try this, this, and this, I'd listen to them. If my channel was doing very well and someone told me to do this, this, and this, I'd be annoyed. I think Amorim was failing. I don't think he was doing well, but I get your point. But listen, people, I am going to wrap up the live stream. I'm going to wrap up the live stream here. I want to big up everyone for tuning in. There's so much to talk about that I'm probably going to do a 5 p.m. live stream before the football games later. But big up everyone. Thank you for watching. Go and raid Never a Foul. Go and raid Never a Foul. Bye.